1964, Hong Kong. The air was thick with tension and expectation. I had been challenged by a traditional sifu who claimed my techniques were destroying the purity of kung fu. His words still echo in my mind. You have abandoned the perfect form for chaos. Those words would come to mean something very different by the end of that night. I watched him prepare before our match. Every movement was a masterpiece of traditional form. Each stance carved from generations of refinement. Each strike a perfect replica of ancient scrolls. He moved like a living testament to everything martial arts was supposed to be. Perfect, precise, beautiful even. The match began, and I felt the weight of every lesson, every correction, every pursuit of perfection I'd ever undertaken. First exchange, my stance was flawless. Second, a textbook sidekick launched with mechanical precision. In that moment, I was everything a martial artist was supposed to be. And I failed. He read me like a book written in bold letters. My perfect technique might as well have been announced through a loudspeaker. In that crystallizing moment, as my perfect kick met empty air, I understood something that would change my life forever. I had mastered the art of being predictable. But then, something broke free inside me, like a bird suddenly realizing its cage door was made of paper. All those years of pursuing perfection, they weren't a path to mastery. They were chains I had forged link by link, technique by technique. In that moment of clarity, I stopped trying to be perfect. Instead, I simply became real. The fight transformed. No more thoughts of proper angles or traditional positions. No more mental checkboxes of perfect form. Just pure, unfiltered expression. My techniques flowed not from ancient scrolls, but from present necessity. Not from memorized patterns, but from authentic response. I won that fight, not because I was more perfect than him, but because I finally understood what true perfection is. The freedom to be imperfect, to be real, to be alive in each moment. This is the great irony I discovered that night. We pursue perfection, thinking it leads to mastery, but it often leads to a prison of our own making. We craft these beautiful bars of flawless technique, never realizing we're locking ourselves inside. The more perfect we try to be, the further we drift from our true power. My friend, the real question isn't how can I achieve perfection? The real question is how can I achieve truth? Because in combat, as in life, truth is not found in the perfect execution of a memorized form. It's found in the honest expression of your authentic self. This is the first lesson you must understand. Perfection is not your destination. It's the obstacle in your path. Let me share what I've observed in countless training halls across Hong Kong and America. Every day I watch students chase the ghost of perfect technique. They stand before mirrors, repeating the same movement hundreds, thousands of times, believing that if they can just make it look exactly like the diagram, exactly like their sifu's demonstration, they will unlock some hidden power. These students, passionate, dedicated, sincere, they come to me with techniques polished like precious jewels, every angle mathematically precise, every position technically flawless. And yet in combat, these same students freeze. Their beautiful techniques shatter like glass against the chaos of reality. Why? Because they've learned to perform, not to fight. They've mastered the map, but never explored the territory. I remember one student in particular. For 3 years, he had practiced a single sidekick until it was absolutely perfect. In demonstrations, it was breathtaking, a testament to human precision. But in sparring, he couldn't land it once. Not because the technique was wrong, but because he had trained himself to execute it only under perfect conditions. He had become a prisoner of his own perfection. This is the cruel irony of perfectionism in martial arts. The more you polish a technique, the more brittle it becomes. Think about this. In all of nature, in all of life, when do you ever encounter perfect conditions? When does the wind blow at exactly the right speed? When does your opponent stand at exactly the right distance? When does your body feel exactly the right way? Never. And this is where the gap between practice and combat becomes a chasm. In the training hall, we create artificial conditions. We work on smooth floors, in good light, with cooperative partners. We break down complex movements into digestible pieces. This is necessary for learning, yes, but it becomes a trap when we mistake these training conditions for reality. Real combat is messy, it's chaotic, it happens on uneven ground, in poor light, against opponents who don't care about your perfect form. Your techniques must work not just in the sterile environment of the Kune, but in the unpredictable chaos of life. I've seen too many martial artists build their house on the sand of perfectionism. They create elaborate castles of technique, never realizing that the foundation itself is flawed. They mistake the finger pointing at the moon for the moon itself. The technique is not the goal, it is merely the vehicle. This obsession with perfect technique is like trying to learn swimming by practicing strokes on dry land. You can perfect every movement, analyze every angle, master every position. But the moment you hit the water, everything changes. The reality of the water demands something different from you than what you practiced on land. True growth in martial arts comes not from perfecting techniques, but from understanding principles. Not from memorizing forms, but from internalizing concepts. Not from achieving technical perfection, but from developing adaptable power. This is the first great misconception we must shatter. The path to mastery is not paved with perfect techniques. It is forged through understanding, adaptation, and honest expression of principle. The most dangerous prison is the one you cannot see. In my years of teaching, I've witnessed something far more limiting than any physical constraint: the mental cage of perfectionism. It's a prison built by the mind, reinforced by fear, and maintained by the illusion of what martial arts should be. I see it in their eyes before I even see it in their movement. The hesitation, the doubt, the endless internal dialogue questioning every motion. Is my angle correct? Is my stance low enough? Am I doing this exactly right? By the time they've finished this mental interrogation, the moment to act has already passed. Their body knows what to do, but their mind has become their jailer. This prison manifests physically too. I've watched students contort themselves into perfect stances that actually restrict their movement. They create tension where there should be fluidity, rigidity where there should be flow. Their quest for perfect form has literally locked their bodies into patterns that prevent natural response. They've traded their freedom for an illusion of control. Let me share something that happened in my school in Oakland. A senior student, technically brilliant, was preparing for a demonstration. For weeks, he drilled his forms until every movement was flawless. But the night before the demonstration, I found him still in the Kune, practicing the same sequence he'd done thousands of times. When I asked why, he said, "I'm afraid it won't be perfect tomorrow." This is the poison of perfectionism. It creates a fear so deep it paralyzes innovation. This student was so trapped in his fear of imperfection that he couldn't see how his obsession was stealing his joy, his creativity, his growth. He had become like a painter so afraid of making a mistake that he never puts brush to canvas. The physical limitations of perfect form are obvious: tension, predictability, lack of adaptability. But the mental prison? That's where the real damage occurs. I've seen students with incredible potential never develop their own style because they're too afraid to deviate from perfect technique. They become excellent copyists, but poor artists. I remember another student, a natural fighter with amazing instincts. In free sparring, his movement was beautiful, effective, alive. But the moment I called it training, he would transform, becoming stiff, mechanical, dead. The mere idea of proper training would activate his prison guard mind, locking away his natural abilities behind bars of perceived perfection. This is perhaps the greatest tragedy in martial arts. Practitioners who imprison their own innovation in cells of traditional thinking. They suppress their natural reactions, deny their instincts, and sacrifice their unique expression on the altar of perceived perfection. The most insidious aspect of this prison is that many mistake it for discipline. They believe their perfectionism is the path to mastery, never realizing it's actually the obstacle. True discipline isn't about perfect replication. It's about perfect honesty with yourself. My friend, understand this. Every moment spent worrying about perfection is a moment stolen from growth. Every natural reaction suppressed in favor of proper form is a piece of your martial soul locked away. Every innovative impulse ignored in favor of tradition is another brick in your prison wall. The first step to freedom is recognizing these bars for what they are, not standards of excellence, but limitations of expression. Your prison guard isn't tradition, or your teacher, or even your art. The guard is your own mind, infected with the virus of perfectionism. The moment of liberation begins with a simple truth. Your so-called mistakes are not your enemies. They are your guides. I discovered this truth watching a young student named David in my Oakland school. For months, he struggled to kick exactly like me, to move exactly like me, until one day, in frustration, he threw a kick in his own natural way. It was nothing like my kick. It was better, not because it was technically perfect, but because it was perfectly his. That moment changed both of us. I saw in his movement what I had been trying to teach all along, the power of authentic expression. His kick wasn't a copy of someone else's art. It was the beginning of his own. In that mistake, he found his first taste of freedom. Liberation comes when you understand that your natural movement is not something to be corrected. It's something to be refined. Think of it like handwriting. We all learn the same basic letters, but each person's hand develops its own unique character. Your fighting style should be no different. The basics are universal, yes, but your expression of them must be uniquely yours. I remember another student, Sarah, who was gifted with incredible speed, but kept trying to fight like her more powerful classmates. She would come to me, frustrated, saying, "I'm doing it wrong." But she wasn't doing it wrong. She was just doing someone else's right. The day she embraced her natural speed, stopped trying to be a power fighter and developed her own flowing style, she became truly formidable. Your body speaks its own truth if you have the courage to listen. Every person I've trained has natural tendencies, ways of moving that feel inherently right to them. These aren't flaws to be corrected. They're foundations to be built upon. When you suppress these natural movements in favor of perfect technique, you're not just limiting your body, you're denying your own martial truth. I've seen this transformation hundreds of times. A student stops trying to move like a martial arts movie, stops trying to match some ideal image, and begins to trust their own instincts. Suddenly, their movement comes alive. What they lose in superficial perfection, they gain in authentic power. Their techniques become less predictable, more adaptive, more real. This journey to authenticity isn't easy. It requires courage to trust yourself when everyone else is chasing an ideal. It demands the wisdom to recognize that your perceived weaknesses often hide your greatest strengths. But most of all, it requires the humility to accept that your way might not look like anyone else's way. And that's exactly as it should be. Let me tell you about James, a student who came to me after 20 years of traditional training. His forms were perfect, his techniques flawless, but he felt empty inside. One day during sparring, he got hit with an unexpected attack and responded instinctively, not with his trained techniques, but with a movement that came naturally to him. In that moment, his face lit up with understanding. He had touched something real, something true, something his. This is the path to liberation, not through mindless repetition of perfect forms, but through mindful exploration of your own truth. Your mistakes aren't failures, they're experiments. Your natural tendencies aren't flaws, they're signatures. Your unique expressions aren't imperfections, they're your art coming to life. Remember, water doesn't try to flow perfectly. It simply flows naturally, and in that naturalness finds its perfect way. Your movement, your art, your expression should be the same. Don't seek to be perfect. Seek to be real. The perfection will take care of itself. True mastery reveals itself not in the perfection of technique, but in the perfection of expression. This is a revelation that changes everything. The moment you understand that mastery isn't about becoming someone else's ideal, but about becoming the fullest version of yourself. In combat, this truth becomes crystal clear. When you fight naturally, authentically, you access something that no amount of perfect technique can match: unpredictability. Your opponents can prepare for textbook techniques, but they cannot prepare for your unique expression. This is where true effectiveness lies, not in the repeatability of your movements, but in their authenticity. I've witnessed this countless times in real fights. The martial artist who moves with authentic expression, who has found their own way, possesses a power that transcends technique. They don't fight like everyone else. They fight like themselves. And in doing so, they access a level of effectiveness that no amount of technical perfection can achieve. Think about the great masters throughout history. Each one was known not for how perfectly they replicated their teachers, but for how uniquely they expressed their art. Their greatness lay not in their conformity, but in their individuality. They became masters not by following paths, but by creating them. This is the paradox that few understand. True freedom in martial arts doesn't come from learning more techniques. It comes from discovering your own way of expressing the techniques you know. It's like learning a language. First, you learn the grammar, the vocabulary, the rules. But mastery comes when you forget the rules and simply speak from your heart. The relationship between freedom and effectiveness is direct and profound. The more freely you express your art, the more effective it becomes. Why? Because authentic movement comes from your core truth. It's not layered with hesitation, doubt, or artificial constraints. It flows naturally, like water finding its path. I've seen fighters with half the technical knowledge, but twice the effectiveness, simply because they fought with authentic expression. Their techniques weren't perfect, but they were real. They weren't trying to be Bruce Lee, or Wong Fei Hung, or anyone else. They were being themselves, and in that authenticity lay their power. This is what I mean by combat applications of authentic movement. When you strike, don't strike like me, strike like you. When you defend, don't defend like the manual shows. Defend in the way that your body naturally wants to move. Your instincts, refined by practice but not replaced by it, will guide you to movements that are both effective and true. The true path of martial arts leads not to some external standard of perfection, but to the perfect expression of your own nature. This is where real power lies, not in the ability to replicate, but in the courage to create. Not in the perfection of form, but in the honesty of expression. Remember, every great martial artist began by learning traditional forms, but they became great by transcending them. They used the forms not as chains to bind them, but as springs to launch them toward their own understanding. This is your path too, to learn the rules so thoroughly that you can move beyond them, to understand the forms so deeply that you can transcend them. Your greatest power will never come from being a perfect copy of someone else. It will come from being the most authentic version of yourself. This is the true path, not to accumulate techniques, but to distill them through the filter of your own nature until what emerges is uniquely, powerfully, undeniably yours. Now we arrive at the heart of what I've been sharing with you. The great paradox of martial arts, and indeed of life itself. What we perceive as imperfect often carries within it the seed of true effectiveness. The crack in the armor becomes the point of greatest flexibility. The perceived flaw becomes the source of unique strength. Think about this deeply. When a flower grows through concrete, it doesn't grow straight. It bends, twists, adapts, and in doing so becomes stronger than any flower growing in perfect conditions. Its imperfections are testament to its vitality, its will to live, its undeniable authenticity. This is exactly how your martial art should be. The harmony between practice and reality isn't found in perfect replication. It's found in perfect adaptation. Yes, practice your techniques. Yes, refine your movements. But understand that this practice is not about achieving some external standard of perfection. It's about developing the ability to express yourself honestly, spontaneously, effectively. I've seen this truth play out countless times. The fighter who embraces their natural rhythm, even if it doesn't match the textbook, becomes more dangerous than the one who fights by the book. The practitioner who trusts their instincts, even when they deviate from tradition, discovers combinations that no manual could teach. This is the power of authentic expression. There is a joy in this revelation, a profound liberation in understanding that your path to mastery lies not in becoming someone else's ideal, but in becoming more perfectly yourself. When you stop fighting against your nature and start fighting with it, everything changes. Your movement becomes more fluid, your responses more natural, your power more complete. This is my final message to you, my friend. Your greatest power lies not in your ability to conform, but in your courage to transform. Not in your capacity to replicate, but in your willingness to create. Not in your pursuit of perfection, but in your embrace of authenticity. Stop trying to be perfect. Start being real. Stop trying to be great. Start being true. Your imperfections, those unique qualities that make you who you are, these are not obstacles to overcome. They are gifts to be developed. They are not weaknesses to be hidden, but strengths waiting to be discovered. The path I'm showing you isn't easy. It requires courage to stand apart, wisdom to trust yourself, and strength to remain authentic in a world that often demands conformity. But this path, the path of honest expression, is the only one that leads to true mastery. Remember, water in a cup becomes the cup. Water in a bottle becomes the bottle. Water in a teapot becomes the teapot. Water can flow or it can crash. Be like water, my friend. Don't try to be perfect. Be perfectly yourself. This is the way of the warrior. This is the path to true power. This is your path. Now go. Express yourself honestly. Fight naturally. Live authentically. The perfect way is no way. Your way is the perfect way.